everyone, I am Vibha Chauhan and welcome to Chauhan Classes Conduct Clear. So today I will explain Class 8 Geography Chapter 1 from NCERT and our chapter is Resources. So as you know that whole geography book of Class 8 is considered on resources. So in our first chapter, that is Resources, we will discuss what are resources and some basic classification of resources. So if we talk about resources, what are resources? Resources, anything that can be used for our needs can be a resource. For example, vegetable, rickshaw, trees, fruits, these are all resources because they have all in one thing common, that is utility or usability. Utility or usability is something that makes an object or substance as a resource. So anything that has a utility can be a resource, and resources can have an economic value or it can be non-economic as well. For example, if it is a metal, if it is a gold or diamond, it has an economic value, but a landscape, a beautiful landscape has not an economic value but has its own value, like its beauty, like its nature. So resources are those substances or objects that have views, that can be used by us and that have value, worth. Worth is something that resources have. Because of worth and usability, resources are resources. Any object or substance can be resource if it has a worth or usability. So our first topic is types of resources. Types of resources. So if we talk about resources, they can be classified into three types, that are natural resources, human-made resources and human resources. So let us discuss them. First is natural resources. Natural resources. So as the name suggests, natural resources are something that is given by nature and we use it without any modifications, like forests, trees, air, water. These are all natural resources. And natural resources, even in natural resources, there are classifications, some basic classifications that are on the basis of their development and use. They can be classified into actual resources and potential resources. So actual resources that are actually present and whose quantity is known. For example, the rich deposits of coal in the region of Ruhr in Germany can be example of actual resources, and it is a classification under natural resources. So there are many examples like iron ore. There are many examples. There can be many examples of actual resources. And next is potential resources. Potential resources are those resources which are not being used at present time and whose quantity may not be known completely. For example, the uranium found in Ladakh of Indian region Ladakh, the uranium found in Ladakh can be example of potential resources because it could be used in future and its quantity is also unknown. So on the basis of their development and use, there are two classifications that are actual resources and potential resources. Now next, on the basis of their origin, there can be also two classifications, that are biotic and abiotic. Biotic resources that are living resources. You can say that living organisms, for example plants and animals, are biotic resources because they are living things. All living things are biotic resources. And next is abiotic resources, that is non-living things. All non-living things like soil, rocks and minerals are examples of abiotic resources because they are not the living things. Now natural resources can be broadly categorized into two types, that are renewable and non-renewable. Renewable and non-renewable. So renewable resources that can be renewed or replenished quickly and whose quantity is unknown, that are unlimited. For example, solar and wind energy that can be renewed and replenished quickly and their quantity is also unlimited, unknown, cannot be known, cannot be limited. So these are renewable resources that can be renewed or replenished in very quick time. and the modifications, the human activities very less affect them. Yet we have to be careful, because in case of water, if you see that if you are wasting it, then it can be limited. So water is a renewable resource, but if we don't minimize the use of water, then it can affect water. Next is non-renewable resources. Non-renewable resources that can be renewed or replenished, but it takes a very long time, very many years, for example for 1,000 years, million years, and you know that span is much more than of a human lifespan, and that is why they are called as non-renewable resources. For example, coal, iron ore, these are all non-renewable resources whose quantity is limited, can be exhausted, and for renewing or replenished it takes a very long time, 1,000 years, a million years, and that is much more than a human lifespan, and that is why they are called as non-renewable resources. Now next, on the basis of distribution, there can be two classifications: ubiquitous resources and localized resources. Ubiquitous resources, as the name, that is universal. Any resource that is universal, that can be taken, that can be occupied by all persons in the world. For example, air that we breathe is in whole world, it's available, its availability is unlimited, is not known, it is present everywhere in the earth, as we know. So air is a ubiquitous resource because it is a universal, its presence is universal, it is present everywhere in the earth, and its presence, its availability is very much, it is present everywhere in the world, and that is why it is ubiquitous resources. Ubiquitous resources are those resources whose availability or presence is everywhere, any person have access to it. And next is localized resources are those which are particularly in some regions, in some locations, that are present at particular locations. For example, iron ore, copper, these are particular in some areas, they are not available at everywhere, at every place of earth. So that are localized resources. Now it was our first resource, that was natural resource. Next is human-made resources. Human-made resources, that is the second type of resources. So human-made resources, as we had seen that natural resources don't need any modifications, but human-made resources that are made by human, for example bridges, vehicles, buildings, roads, these are human-made resources because they are converted from natural resources to human made. Before, earlier they were natural resources, but now at present time they have been modified by human, and those are called human made resources. So human made resources are those resources which are made by human, by us, by people, and technology is one of the most important example. So technology is also a human made resource. Now next type of resources is human resources. Human resource, that is the most important resource because of us, of our skill, of humans knowledge, of humans technology, we are able to make resources, we are able to present, to recognize resources, and thus the human resources, human people are also a resource, and that is human resources. All people, all person or human being are a human resources, and human resource development is something that is for their development of their skill, of people's skill, knowledge, education, technology. So human resource development is what is called as for the development of skill of people, technology of people, education of people, knowledge of people. So there are three types of resources: natural resources, human made resources, and human resources. And resources are very important, but there can be everything something that has a use is a resource, and human have to recognize them as well, because if you're not able to recognize, in the case of, as you know that in the case of potential resources, if we are, because of technology, because of less technology, we are the present type technology is not that of high level that can recognize the potential resources. So it is us humans who have to recognize resources. For example, it was fire. Fire was not a resource until we learned cooking. Water is used for hydroelectricity. If we didn't know that, then how it could become a very important resource. So we have to recognize it. So next and last topic is conserving resources. Conserving resources. So we have discussed resources and some basic classifications of resources. Now we have to conserve our resources as well. Conserving resources is that we have to use them properly, carefully, because if we don't do that, then it will affect our resources. And there is something most important term that is called as sustainable development. Sustainable development is something that is called as that we use renewable resources as in a manner that can be used in future generations as well. For example, if you have something as a renewable resources, for example, you can say uranium. If you have uranium in some amount, then you have to use it in such a manner that it can be used after 50 years or 100 years or million years or 1,000 years. It can be many years that can be used in future generations as well. So sustainable development is something that we have to use resources in such a manner that it could be present in future generations as well. And there are some points of sustainable developments. For example, that we have to conserve earth, we have to conserve our environment, we have to change our personal attitude and practices towards environment. We have to respect and take care of all forms of life on the earth. We have to improve the quality of human life. We have to minimize our depletion of our environment. That is, you know that we human are depleting our environment. So we have to minimize the depletion of our environment. These are goals. These are some goals of sustainable development. There are many goals, but these are some important goals of sustainable development. So this is about resources. We have understood what resources are and some basic classifications. This is all about the chapter, and after studying this chapter, you can say that what we have learned in this chapter is that we have to respect and take care all forms of life on the earth. We have to conserve our resources, we have to conserve our environment, and we have to minimize the uses of resources, because if we don't minimize them, then it could be possible that they are not present, they would not be present at future. So in this chapter, this is all about the chapter. We have discussed resources, we have understood what resources are, and we have understood some basic classifications of resources. By the way, the whole book is considered on resources, so we will be discussing more about resources in the further chapters of this book. So this is all about the chapter. I have discussed all topics and subtopics, and I will be covering further chapters in further videos. So thank you very much.